This is the Horse Radio Network.
This is episode 457 on the Dressage Radio Show on the Horse Radio Network, brought to you by Kentucky Performance Products, Total Saddle Fit, and Dr. Rose's Remedies. Tonight we are going to continue with our Young Horse series with Michael Bragdell and 5-year-olds. Reese and Richard Malgren will recap the Carl Hester Masterclass that took place in Wellington last week, and of course we have a great trainer tip.
This is Reese Koffler-Stanfield from Loxahatchee, Florida.
This is Philip Parks from Rockwood, Ontario, and you're listening to the Dressage Radio Show. So maybe you could tell us what's going on in Wellington.
Yeah, you guys, I feel bad, and everybody on the Northeast, we're thinking about you because it sounds like a really bad storm hit there too.
Well, they got it worse than we did. Yeah, we're fine.
Terrible.
But yeah, they got a bunch of stuff down there. Yeah.
Yeah, and lost power. So we're thinking about you guys. But it's been really great down here. I'm not gonna lie, very busy. Season is in full swing. This week has been nice from the standpoint of there's just a national show. There's no CDI this week, which is kind of nice because then we get a little extra training from our trainers that would be showing in the CDI, which is nice. And it's a down week, but it's been a busy week for me training-wise, which has been lots of fun.
Reese, you forgot your highlight.
Oh, my highlight was...
I came and watched a dressage test with you.
You did last week.
Yes.
I had to think about I was like, what day was that?
You
it's always kind of like
what you're up to, yeah.
I do. It's Groundhog's Day here because it really is kind of the same day every day. So that's right. Glenn stopped by. You should check out our Facebook. And he came just in time to see Adrian Lyle and Laura Graves. So he literally picked
the two best ones.
Two best riders and the two best American riders that rode that weekend.
I was like, okay, I'm done. I watched my 2 dressage tests. Yep. I'm out.
He was out, and I was like,
that was it.
It was it. It was all I needed to see. What else would I want to watch after watching those two? It was like, that's it. I'm good now.
Wow. It was great. He had quite a good time.
It was a 5-star too. So
it was a 5-star, and it was phenomenal.
And then we went shopping.
I know. It was fun. I like those business meetings. Those were fun. Dressage and shopping. Yes. So, yeah, that was super fun. So, I know Glenn got to come and visit. You were on your way for the Florida podcast,
right? Yeah,
from
the Finding Florida podcast. We went and did an adventure over the weekend, and I thought, well, I'm going to stop and see Reese on my way.
It was so fun. So that was a very fun highlight. And then actually the next day, my husband Travis came for a visit. So I had to really think about it. I'm like,
all the good-looking men in your life, except for Phil.
Yeah, I needed Phil, and then I would have been all set. But so that's why I really had to think about it. But the horses are all going well here, and really in full swing and going for it. Their coats are coming out and got big dapples. So we're doing well. So I had great lessons yesterday and carrying on for tomorrow and all that good stuff. So we have a great show this week. I hope you guys are all going to enjoy it. We're going to start with Michael Bragdell. He is the director of training at Hilltop Farm. He's going to talk about 5-year-olds. And then Richard Malgram's going to come on, and we're going to recap the master class that happened in Wellington. And then Phil and I have a great trainer tip. So after this break from Kentucky Performance Products, we're going to come back with Michael Bragdell.
This Nutrition Minute is brought to you by Kentucky Performance Products, the company that simplifies your search for research-proven nutritional supplements at kppusa.com.
Commercial feeds are fortified with nutrients such as proteins, vitamins, and minerals. They are made up of a variety of ingredients that provide a particular amount of energy. Most feeds have been designed to address the needs of a certain type of horse. It is important to understand that all feeds are formulated by nutritionists to be fed in specific amounts. When the correct amount of feed is provided, the horse consumes the appropriate amount of energy and nutrients. The feeding directions included on the feed bag or the feed tag are specific to the particular feed and should be followed. When you feed less than the recommended amount of feed, your horse is not getting the full complement of nutrients that he or she may need. On the other hand, too much of a good thing can also be bad. The overfeeding of concentrates can lead to grain overload and oversupplementation, and feeds should never be cut or mixed with other fortified feeds or plain grains because this changes the nutrient profile and can cause imbalances in energy, protein, vitamins, and minerals. If you need to include additional supplements in your horse's diet, choose products that are formulated to complement, not compete with fortified feeds. If you feed a plain grain such as oats, additional fortification may be necessary. Kentucky Performance Products supplements are specifically designed to complement, not compete with, the modern concentrates used by today's horse owners. Each supplement is manufactured to exacting standards in certified facilities using stringent quality control guidelines. So choose Kentucky Performance Products supplements because the horse that matters to you matters to them. Learn more about Kentucky Performance Products supplements at kppusa.com. That's kppusa.com.
This Nutritional Minute has been brought to you by Kentucky Performance Products. You can find all of their terrific products at kppusa.com.
Well, tonight for our continued series on young horses, we are so honored to have our friend Michael Bragdell. He is the Director of Training at Hilltop Farm and no stranger to the Young Horse Program. Michael, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Reed.
We are so happy to have you. And I was looking at your bio, and I actually couldn't count how many young horse shows you've been to. Do you even know? A lot.
Yeah, it's been a few. Over the years, I don't know how many it's been, but there's been a slew of young horses that have qualified and gone to the championships over the years.
I love it. I love it for sure. So today we're specifically talking about 5-year-olds. So, and you work with many young horses. So tell us, what do you expect sort of a normal 5-year-old to do? And then if you are ready and preparing that 5-year-old for the national championships. So let's start with sort of the normal 5-year-old. What do you normally do with that horse?
The 5-year-olds, I think the young horse classes to start with, for me, I use it more as a guideline for my young horses of what I would like them to do. It doesn't always match up because of how they are growing. Both physically and mentally. So it just depends a little bit on each horse and how I'm going to bring them along to the next step. If you're looking at it from them coming out of doing the 4-year-olds, for example.
Right. So tell us basically what is in the 5-year-old FEI 5-year-old test.
So the 5-year-old test, in comparison to 4-year-olds, 4-year-olds, I really like that test. It doesn't really overface the 4-year-olds, I feel, but it's challenging enough. Then when you come to the 5-year-olds, it's a totally different step up. All of a sudden, there is collection expected out of the horses, counter canter, simple changes, turn on the haunches. I think even a rein back, actually. I don't know the test on top of my head, but so it's a totally different level of expectation once you come up to the 5-year-old test.
I love it. So you've got your canter walk transitions as well. Is that something you do a lot with the 5-year-olds?
If they're going to do the 5-year-old test, they obviously have to learn to do the walk, canter, walk transitions. That's a fairly difficult movement, I think, to teach to young horses. And it's a big jump up from doing that simpler test that the 4-year-olds are doing.
So let's still talk a little bit about the young horse test because the expectations are a little bit different than, say, the normal technical test, first level, second level. So I think, especially when you come into this simple changes idea and that I think from my own perspective, my own horses, that I'm not trying to really perfect that movement, that it has to be completely, kind of collected canter, right away walk, right? I mean, there is some allowance for some mistakes and some small problems, and and you're thinking about really doing a good job of training and not putting all this expectation of executing perfect transition. What are your thoughts on that idea?
It's a progression. Obviously, when I start training the simple changes for the 5-year-olds, it's not the way it's in the test. I will not ride a pattern and go walk canter and then go straight into counter canter, etc. So it's a progression of, maybe I start with the trot canter transitions, and then I immediately go back to trot and then walk, and then use the same spot as that was my canter depart spot. I use that for my walk to canter transition. So it simplifies it a little bit. Maybe I use for counter canter, I use the first 3 counter canter loop as a way to introduce the counter canter, and then you kind of build on that. So it doesn't happen all in one session, so to speak. It's a progression, and you have to kind of keep in mind that as you're training the young horse, you have to know your horse. You have to listen to it, and what's going on. Why am I having all of a sudden issues? Is it maybe sore from the training, or does it need a little break from the training in the indoor and need to go out for some trail riding, or change it up with some free jumping or cavalettis? I think the variety in the training for me is really important with young horses, because I want them to stay fresh in the brain, and I want them to be excited to come in the ring and work.
And Michael, can you tell us a little bit about people who are not familiar with how the young horse tests are judged, and what the difference is from the technical side of the sport? And I understand that you don't get a mark for every single movement, and how. And tell us how that goes.
Yeah, so like you said, it's not, each movement does not get scored, so it doesn't necessarily become end of the world if you have a mistake here and there. What really counts in the young horse classes is the gaits. You have a total of 5 scores: the walk, the trot, the canter, submission, or I think now it's a different terminology for the submission score, but and then general impression. So when you really look at it, you only have 5 scores. So in order to do well in the young horse classes, you need to have at least 2 fairly good quality gaits. I would say you should have 3 confident gaits that are solid, and then the training needs to be there too. I think it's tough to present a 5-year-old early in their 5-year-old year and be ready. That means that you've had to have that training already in the fall of their 4-year-old year. Mm-hmm. So, right. It's different from horse to horse, and some horses they bloom late, so they're growing a lot, and maybe they're not finished their physical development until later in the 5-year-old year. So you kind of have to adjust a little bit in your training plans. It's always great to have a goal, but goals can be changed.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's it. That's the big thing with the young horses is, the way they are now, they maybe in 3 months, they're not quite like that. It's hard. So with a 5-year-old, how many times a week do you work a 5-year-old?
Again, it depends. Each horse is a different individual. So it really matters on each specific horse. But I would say on average, I probably work them 5 days a week. Mm-hmm. And one of those days would be a trail ride, or take them on the track and canter them. And each day they worked in a ring. It's not necessarily 45 minutes. It might be 15, 20 minutes. I get on, I feel like I accomplished what I needed. Maybe that day is just working on connection and walk, draw, canter, and then they're done. So it really varies dependent on the horse. And for me, like 5 days of working, it's not always that you come in the ring and you work 45 minutes. That's not, it's not the time that you're sitting on their back, it's the quality. So.
Yeah, that's a very good point.
Yeah, I like that a lot.
I was also thinking about, as you're progressing the horse, I mean, that for me, that 5-year-old test doesn't encompass everything that I'm, doing to train the 5-year-old. I have 2 of them this year, and one of the important aspects, I think, is starting to teach some leg yield and some moving away from, and then that's not in that test, right? So, I'm always, kind of thinking about progressing. So normally I would show a 5-year-old in the first level classes, if they're not super special or whatever. But, what are some other things that you're trying to do in the horse's training that aren't necessarily, towards the FEI young horse classes, but some things that you have to get done to train that horse properly so that, they continue to progress in their work? Like you said, leg yield is a good point to bring up. It's something that I introduced to the horses. I might already introduce it end of their 4-year-old year, and sometimes even earlier in their 4-year-old year, I will introduce the leg yield. And again, it's not the type of leg yield that we see in the show ring. It's sort of a baby version of it. Mm-hmm. It's not about how steep the leg yield is. It's more about yielding correctly to the inside leg, and if that takes me the whole long side to go from center line out to the rail, I'd rather that than they run away from my inside leg, and in half the size of the arena they go from center line to the track, if that makes sense. Yeah, I think, leg yield, we've talked about that quite a bit on the show, and just how it's supposed to carry the rider forward and over and not just falling to the side, So I think that's an important, an important aspect of the 5-year-old year is also the horse developing more push, So if I think about, in 4-year-old, we'll show maybe the training level, and now 5 years old, we'll show first level. Then we're introducing lengthenings where the horse is developing more power from behind the saddle and on the horse's hindquarters. And for the special ones, the ones that you've already developed a little bit of that power, then maybe you develop collection for the FEI test. But for the ones that might be a little bit weak or really growing, I mean, I just, I'm talking about, I have 2 5-year-olds, and one is like 17.1 and one is like 16.2, one's become very mature quickly, and the other one is taking a much longer time to kind of grow up and grow into his body and put muscle on. So, I mean, you like you said, there's a big variance in the horses in the 4-year-old, 5-year-old year that you have to really adjust your program. So the one can collect okay, and the other one can't collect. He's just developing his push power. But I think that's something, that's can be tricky in 5 years old. Making sure they have enough push that then you can collect and you don't rush through that phase. So I guess, do you have anything to add to that kind of idea of what the horses should be learning and how you're careful about developing them?
No, I think that's very valid points that you bring up, because it's again, it varies very different from horse to horse. Like you said, some of these tall giants that are 17 plus hands, when at 4 or 5, it takes them a little time to kind of figure out their balance and figure out where they have their legs. So you kind of have to adjust accordingly. I think there is a, throughout their education, I feel it's always important that you're focusing on the connection and working on on the straightness. That's sort of I think the bread and butter behind everything that you're doing. Like you can, if they're ready to work on the collection, starting to be able to collect, but you don't really have a good connection, and then you ask for more impulsion, it's not gonna, it doesn't.
Yeah.
It won't really work.
Yeah.
Yeah. You're not going to come to a good end in 3 months or something.
Exactly. So, and it's the very basic stuff is very important to focus on. And it doesn't mean that, like you said, every 5-year-old is not doesn't have to do the 5-year-old test. And I don't think every 5-year-old will fit in the 5-year-old test, just of what's expected. So, and there's nothing wrong in focusing on the training level test and the first level test instead. They can be very successful. It doesn't mean that the horse is not going to be a successful dressage horse.
Yeah, I think you should start from the bottom and work your way up, and eventually you'll get somewhere, right? But if you rush, you're going to have to end up going backwards anyway at some point, I think.
Exactly, yeah.
And, I think it's really a tricky year also for horses' mental development because, you're starting to really ask maybe some tougher questions of the horse, right? And coming to this stage in their life, they've, had a good time, and I like to take them out on walks, and just make sure that they're solid individuals. But then when you start to ask them questions, I've had a couple of horses, maybe a few, that have kind of tried to figure out if they have to work or whether they have to do the job. And, because I think about this stage as being, a horse's teenage stage where there can be a little bit of rebellion in there, or, just to try, they realize that they're really big and riders are quite small, and we don't have a lot of, power to do much if they decide they want to. I've had some horses stop, all kinds of different things, right? And just to test out their strength and power. So, do you have any thoughts on, kind of the horses that maybe you'll see some misbehavior, or any thoughts on that idea?
I think it starts a little bit earlier, even, even with our 3 and 4-year-olds, I set a certain expectation of what I expect when I put my leg on. On a 3-year-old, I have expectation what the connection should be like. That when I put my leg on, I feel them push into the bit. And that's important that I get that established early on in the 3-year-old year. It's not that I'm looking for them to carry like a second level horse, but there is an expectation of how their hind leg should react when I apply my leg, and come over the back into the connection and really strengthen that relationship between the hind leg and the bit over the back. And that for me is really important. Really, even early on, when they're 3 and when they're 4. And then when I start asking a little more difficult questions, when I take the step up from the very basic addition and subtraction, I go more to pre-cal and calculus questions.
Mm-hmm.
It's not such a big deal if I have addressed those things early on and really focus on those basic stuff. And it doesn't mean that just because I focus on those very basic things in the training scale early on in their life, I still do it later on when they're 5 or 6 or 8 or 10. It always is part of how I start the training session. I ask those same questions, really, is to check what horse do I have today? Is it the horse that I had a fabulous ride on yesterday, or do I have to stay a little bit longer on working on the reaction to my leg and establishing a better connection? It could be a million reasons why they don't feel as good today as they felt yesterday. But unfortunately, they can't tell us that. So
that would make our life
have
easier.
To figure out.
So, Michael, along those lines, like, how do you figure out whether you're having a saddle fit problem or a muscle problem, or how do we evaluate whether it's, that might be the issue, or it might be a little bit of a discipline issue? How do you go about, figuring out those problems with young horses in general? I think that's a really tough question for anyone, for trainers and owners alike, when to back off a little bit, when to try and push through a problem. And so how do you go about it in your own training and your own program?
I think with young horses, when you run into problems or issues, you can do it a little bit by elimination of, okay, maybe I think it's the saddle, so maybe I try a different saddle, or maybe I check with my vet if they recommend some body work on a horse, some chiropractic work. Sometimes you can, chiropractic treatment could alleviate, some training issues you might have. Or you might have a chiropractor just say, it's just normal soreness. I don't really see anything here. Saddle looks good, blah, blah, blah. And then you can kind of move on to the next step and say, okay, well, what else do I need to look at? Do I need to change something in my training program? Do I need to give them a break from the training regimen that I'm currently on and maybe switch to something else? So I think there's lots of possibilities. You can just have to have an open mind to be able to pick and choose what you want to look at. But I think with that said, you should change one thing at a time. So okay, I changed the saddle. That didn't change anything. Okay, well, let's look at whatever it might be. If it's a bit, for example, like, okay, now I changed a bit and see if I get an improvement.
There has to be a systematic way to do it, right?
Exactly.
I think it's not changing a new thing every day.
Every day, you
change the saddle, ride 3 times, change the bit, ride a few times, right? I mean, one time doesn't tell you one thing or another, right?
Exactly.
He has to adjust. I think one of the biggest things for me and just in general is just, if you have somebody close by, as trainers, we have a really great big network that we can bounce ideas off of, and we can use video or, get somebody out, say, hey, can you come look at this horse? Maybe have someone ride it, or pay to have your trainer out, right? And
exactly.
Or, ship the horse somewhere and say, I'm having a problem, especially, when it starts, right? That's the time to kind of look at things right away and say, okay, can we get ahead of this? Don't wait for 3, 6, 8 months and then say, oh, now I'm exhausted. Now this problem has been pervasive for this long time and I just can't solve it. I think just being on top of things and really trying to think ahead of what you're going to do and what's next. And I think because a young horse that learns a bad behavior or is having a pain issue, learns that stuff really fast and, can learn to not like the riding, or can learn that if they do something, they can get out of work. I think, like you can't sit on these problems, because the horses become very reactive very fast and learn very fast at this stage in life, which is great when it's going well, but is awful when it's going badly. So I think that's kind of advice on this, is to be on top of things all the time, really quickly.
Yeah, I think it makes total sense. And I think young horses, they're using muscles that they've never used before. And it's like, when I go to the gym, I use muscles sometimes I've never used before. I'm sore, and that happens. And I think that has to be part of, as you're developing these horses, they need some support, and you do need to be on top of, does the bit fit, or did his mouth change, or all those things. So I think it's part of being a good young horse rider and developer. So Michael, thank you so much for coming onto our show. If our listeners had any questions, how could they reach you online?
They can reach me via email. My email is Michael, Michael, at hilltopfarminc.com.
Fantastic. Thank you, Michael.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Thank you for having me on.
Dr. Rose's Remedies Skin Treatment Salve and Spray are 100% all-natural products. They are anti-inflammatory, antibacterial, antiviral, and antifungal. Dr. Rose's are made with all human-grade ingredients and are safe and effective for treatment for all manner of cuts and scrapes on your horse. And Dr. Rose's is the must-have product here at the Horse Radio Network headquarters to keep PT Scooter's delicate white pasterns free from dew poisoning and scratches. Ask for Dr. Rose's at your local tax store or feed supplier, or visit them online at drrosesremedies.com. That's drrosesremedies.com.
Well, tonight we are so happy to have our friend, FEI rider and trainer and long lighting extraordinaire, Richard Malgrim, on the show. Richard, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much.
What did you think a little bit about the Carl Hester clinic that happened here at Global last week?
Well, I really, really loved it. I think he's such a good communicator. Obviously, he's got all the backing up from all his Olympic participations and medals and years of experience, and so that always is helpful, especially when you then agree with the philosophy and when you have somebody like that really gives that same perspective, So I was thrilled, and I sat and really, really enjoyed all the different horses, and there were 6 horses, if I recall correctly,
Mm-hmm.
And there was one theme that I would want to talk about, and that was every single horse he wanted to stretch, and open up its back, and that was, so fun to see, even from the young 5-year-old and all the way up to Jan Ebling's, schooling the Grand Prix movement.
For those of us who weren't there, tell us a little bit about the format. Was it basically lesson teaching, or what was the format of the discussions?
Yeah, I think it was. I mean, it was the horse had probably come in a little bit warmed up, and then I don't know exactly the time that he had with each horse, but he did touch on how what he wanted to see in the horse and the basic gaits of the horse, and then he wanted to get the message across, so it was kind of a both instructing and lecturing in a same kind of theme. It was definitely not just a lesson to the rider horse combination, but it was definitely towards the great audience that was there, so they could really see the format and the theme that he had through the clinic.
Yeah. So because I have seen Carl. He was here in Canada last fall, and I think he was on the East Coast as well last fall. And people seem to get a lot out of his instruction in the way that he talked about each horse's individual problems, but also overall theme on how we should be developing our horses. And I think that's what you're getting into there, Richard, about the stretching, and that the horses have to be above everything else, really relaxed and really willing and really not always ridden tight and in a show frame, and really, because we can see a lot of riders these days really try and kick and, for lack of better terms, kick and pull the horses together in a tight frame, and then, just do a test pattern, and are not really addressing, kind of an overall development of the horse, in a correct way, of all the muscles being able to be long and short. So, and Reese and Richard and I were just discussing this before we came on air, and just how nice it's to see that from a very successful rider and a successful coach and teacher and mentor, really, get back down to the basics with all the horses, and focus on, correct. I think I use the term sometimes, classical, but really, I think that's just a way of developing the horse through the back, and in a quiet way, and that's nice to see from Carl. I think that that's kind of my point. So.
Yeah, no, I agree 100%, and that's the thing is, I don't necessarily always, classical, modern, this is a sport that, it's been around since 1912 in the Olympics in Stockholm, and it's just a way that we have trained horses, and so it's like the same thing that, a tennis player has trained in tennis. Have things changed? The athletes have gotten, better, the tennis rackets and the balls and so forth. But the ground strokes and the rules of the game, are the same. And so I just think that there is no shortcuts. And I really think that was displayed very, very clear in his clinic. And that's, again, another part of why I really liked it, because, again, you get a horse in your stable and you don't know the previous of that, and so you got to analyze what you have, and every horse is on its own journey, and it's like the 5-year-old, he might be ready to do the 5-year-old test, but he might not, because he had an injury as a 4-year-old, and then he's like 17-2 and very awkward when he arrives to your stable as a 5-year-old, and then it wouldn't be fair to do the 5-year-olds, and so we have to take those things in consideration when we look at the individual horses.
Richard, one of the other things I really liked about the clinic was we saw there were 6 horses, but we started with a junior rider, and then we saw a young rider. Actually, we started with a younger horse, and then a junior rider, then a young rider, and then they went into the small tour. So there's an I1 horse, and then a kind of a developing Grand Prix horse, and a Grand Prix horse. And one of the things that I thought was interesting was how he handled and worked with the young riders. I just found like he didn't treat them like a young rider, if that makes sense. I mean, he really treated them like real riders. Did you notice that as well?
Yeah, and I think that it was interesting to see. There was one girl that he asked to do a turn on the haunches, and and he got a little big, and then he was like making a little comment about that, and then he had the girl actually going to a kind of a half pass in the walk, and then turn the horse, on the haunches, around, because again, that would set up the same aids, and then they got really quite nice. But I think that's, again, the thing about being able to break things down, because, obviously there's a lot to ride in front of Carl Hester. And then on top of that, you got like 1,000, however many people were there, but it was like a big group. So, it's obviously a little bit of nerves too, involved in it, but I do think that that's a really gift, to be able to break down things, in simple matters, when you run into something, because we all can get in that point where it's like a block, and then louder and yelling doesn't solve it,
No, it makes it worse.
Yeah, exactly. So no, I think that, it was really interesting to see that variety. Somebody has commented to me that they wish there would have been an amateur, and that's just because, I think this sport in America, it's about 90% of amateurs in it, and so they are the biggest part of our industry, and so you can't really blame them that they think that they should have a little bit of a part of it too. And I think that, you can look at that in different ways. You can say, well, that you need to develop your eye and you need to see it from as most ideal. But again, it's the same. I just think that, if you have an amateur, then they could have very well placed in the clinic, because he's such a good teacher,
Oh, yeah.
that he could do that,
Well, and they had a pretty short time. Yeah, right.
Yeah.
I mean, it was only the whole class was only, they called it a master class. It was only 3 hours, and I think they really tried to have horses from. There was a horse from Great Britain. There was a Canadian horse. There were horses all over. It wasn't just American riders and American. I thought they did a pretty good job, and I personally have seen amateurs that they ride better than a lot of professionals. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it didn't strike me as anything other than, that they had 2 essentially juniors. But, like I said, I thought amateurs, I've seen some really good amateurs, so they would have had.
Oh, absolutely. No. I just said again that I've heard somebody say that,
That was interesting.
And again, it's not, it's not that it shouldn't be there or should be there. I just think that it's an interesting comment, and it is interesting to know that, again, our industry the majority is amateurs. Then again, should you say that, where is the best way of having Carl give his wisdom to, is it to a trainer that can get the information and then disperse it like rings on water to his or her students? That's how I always sometimes see it, that it's like, if you have a chance to work with such an incredible rider, then that can be then passed on, to other people. So anyway, I just again just really, really liked his approach to each horse and to and the theme of making a healthy, sound horse that is going to have a long career, and I think that that's also something that's interesting in today's dressage, is like how long are they in sport, and we all know that things can happen with these horses and stuff. But again, if we do train them, that was why dressage initially was initiated. It was so that the military horses would last longer, so that we started to ride them, ambidexter to both sides, and so that they could have a longer lasting military career, period, So
yeah,
that's a really good way. Yeah, it's a good way to think about it. Think back to the origins of training a horse. I mean, you don't want a horse that goes to Grand Prix and then breaks down a year later. Then you have to train it because we know that it takes so long to train them. If we're training correctly and doing it the right way, then we want to be able to ride that beautiful, balanced, correctly muscled horse over a long period of time, because it takes so long to get them there. You got to think in the longer terms of things, and having 15, 16, 18-year-old horses that are still competing. I think that's really, kind of the point. We want to really help the horses in their careers and give them longevity and a good life and good quality, and not be in pain all the time and that kind of thing. So I think, it just comes back to correct training produces that, I think, as its goal, and not always flashy movement as the goal,
No, absolutely. And again, it goes back to a little bit about, leg movers versus back movers, and I think that's, obviously a very kind of hot topic, where you can get a lot of, flashiness, but then you do a lot of times sacrifice the mobility in the back, and coming over. And again, that is something that at the end of the day, our sport are, determined by the judges. They are the ones that are scoring, and they are the ones that whatever they reward, that's what people are gonna ride. And that's why for me, it was just so unbelievable great when Vallegro came into the to the world stage, and then also Damon Hill. So like the 2012 Olympics, it really took a new stage, in my opinion, from where we had been a little bit with Selinaro and the controversial Totilas and this, but then with Vallegro and Damon Hill and that, it's just really made a big shift in a positive way, I think, for the sport, and I think that we hope we can continue ride on those horses now that Vallegro is retired, and that there are other horses that can take on that torch, and carry on and promote the classical and the real way of being trained. And Carl said that in the clinic, how it took a long time for Vallegro to really stretch, and how they had to work. And I think if I remember exactly, he said, he didn't really do like a full blown, stretch until he was like 7 years old, which I think is very remarkable to hear. But that means that they've been continuing working on that, even if the horse is starting to, obviously at 7 years of age, starting to do collective works and stuff. But he was still having a little hard time to doing the full stretch, and I think those things are very fascinating to hear when you hear a little bit of backstories about how good horses being trained and how their journeys are, because that's how I believe, every single one of them have their own journey.
Yeah, it's so true. And I just think that that's such a good thing for people to remember, and that they bring into this is they being Carl, Hester, and Charlotte. The horses are treated like horses, and they're ridden well, and that's showcased in the way that they train them. And I think that that's always a good reminder for us all, because we do want to train our horses to have healthy, happy athletes at the end of the day. So that's always fun to see. And I thought that did really show through. If you ever get a chance to sort of, watch Carl, I had seen Charlotte in person, and they actually are very different in their styles. Carl is, you can see why he's the trainer and he does all that. So it was a fun experience. I thought it was great for all of Wellington to see and to hear. And Richard, do you have any final statements about the clinic?
No, I mean, just that he was very much about like cross training, which is, I grew up, my father was an event rider, and so not that I've ever gone, cross country eventing, but it's like, that's been my background because that's what he did, and so I just have always enjoyed cross training. And then to hear Carl saying, we were only in the arena, so many days, and then we go outside and we canter in the field, and we used to hack our horses down to the beach in Sweden where I grew up. And you can still do a downward transition from canter to trot with the same, principles down by the beach as you do in the 20x60 when you're being judged, because it's through consistency, that horses learn, and repetition. So we can't deviate just because we are down by the beach, then we don't care. But when we're in the 20x60, we care. But it's like a variety of things, but we still have high standards. And that's really, what I believe in, and that's what I heard and saw. And it was my first time to have seen him in live teaching and giving a clinic. I've had friends that have participated both in the Canadian clinic that he did this fall, and also in the one that was in the Northeast in Maine. And I've just heard so many positive things from them, and so I was so excited to be able to participate and hear his masterclass here in Wellington. So I think it was a super injection of positiveness for our sport of dressage. And there's been a lot of talk and buzz and obviously, some things written up, and now here we are continuing talking about this masterclass. So yeah, it was great.
Awesome. I love it. Well, Richard, thank you so much for your time. And how can our listeners find you online if they have any questions about your business and your long lining, which we are going to talk about in our next segment?
Probably Facebook is the best way to get in touch with me. I don't really have a website. Richard Malmgren on social media, Facebook is probably the best way to reach me.
This week's dressage training tip is brought to you by Total Saddle Fit, home of the shoulder relief girth at TotalSaddleFit.com.
Well, today, Phil, we have a great Total Saddle Fit tip of the week, but we just want to talk real quickly about the shoulder relief synthetic girth. We both use this, and yes, we use it in our barns on a daily basis, and I love this girth. I've had a lot of success with this girth. I probably have 3 horses that go in it right now. How about you, Phil?
I just basically use it on the one. I think, well, for me, I like all of the horses to have their own stuff so that, if I need to get on one, in order of things, that they all have their own girths and stuff. But I really like this girth. I use it on kind of a pudgier horse. I don't want to insult him, but he's a little bit rounder and he's a little bit rounder, and I decided to kind of switch to this girth. He was going in a normal one, but then Justin sent this one to me, and I was like, this is the perfect girth for this horse because his saddle would roll a little bit side to side, and so with the ergonomic shape of the shoulder relief girth, I thought, okay, if this is going to hold the saddle in place, then I'm going to be a big fan, and it does, and it did. Works really good. Really great price point on this girth, and really low maintenance. So I think there's just a ton of reasons why you should like this girth. It's antimicrobial. You can hose it off. It's great for the summer, fine in the winter. So
yep.
I think,
big fan. And they hold up
right
really
away.
well.
Yeah,
they actually, they really, so I've had problems with synthetic girths not holding up, and this girth holds up really well. So really like it a lot. So excellent. And as always, you can find all the girths at TotalSaddleFit.com. And Justin is always great with questions if you have any question. And his email is justin@TotalSaddleFit.com. So Phil, you've got a great listener question this week. What you got?
Well, we got a listener that decided to send us a couple of questions here. I think we're going to tackle the first one first. This question I get quite a bit actually in the training. So it's about trained horses, upper level horses, schoolmaster horses that the listener, Jen in Ohio, has decided to ask a question about snaffle versus double bridles. Do you always, once a horse is introduced to the double bridle, do you always ride it in the double bridle? Are there some horses that are better in the snaffle? How much are you riding in the snaffle an upper level horse? How much are you riding the double? How is this built into your training? So I can throw it to you here, Reese, and you can talk about that.
Sure. Well, I think the first part of that question is it depends.
Yeah.
And every horse is a little bit different. And it comes here too. One of the things that I really try to do, if possible, is I like between the snaffle and the double to have the bradoon and the snaffle bit be the same bit. That's not always possible, but in a lot of cases it is. So you end up having to sort of buy a snaffle and buy a bradoon. But I do like, if I can, to keep those similar. I have 2 horses right now in doubles on a upper level basis right now on a day. I ride them daily, and I almost always start my week out in a snaffle. That's just me. We call it Monday, and I like to on a Monday put my horses in a snaffle. It just sort of gets the week started. That's just how I like to do it, but that doesn't mean it's right or wrong. And I in an ideal world, a horse can do a Grand Prix in a snaffle. As we all know, for a lot of reasons, that it's not a ideal world, and we can't always do what we want. So again, it really just takes some understanding and time and working with that horse to decide which way they want to go. I've had some horses you can switch them every day and it doesn't matter. And then I have some horses that hate that. And that if they sort of start in a double, you need to finish in the double. They don't like to switch back and forth between the two. So again, I think it just really depends on your horse and how that horse is. Again, I put him in, even starting a horse in a double, it really depends. If the horse is ready, when they're 6, I like to kind of start playing with it. And that's a very general term. Like, let's kind of introduce this. But I have a lot of horses right now in my barn that were eventers, and now they're dressage horses, and they've switched. And those guys are pretty easy because they're used to having sort of a lot of stuff in their mouth. So what we put in their mouth, they're like, oh, this is nothing. So that's something. But as a general rule, I like it on a Monday or a hack day or lighter day. I'll put them in a snaffle, but that doesn't mean I want to be able to ride my horse and do the Grand Prix in whatever I put him in. So that's kind of where I am. Phil, where are you? What do you think?
I think it's interesting because most recently they've changed some of the rules around riding 4th level through Grand Prix, and that you are allowed in the national levels to ride the horse all the way to Grand Prix in a snaffle, if that's your choice, which is great because there are a few horses that don't like the double at all, don't go well in the double, don't like it, too much bits, and so that can be problematic, which is really, if you can do it, if you can do the Grand Prix in the snaffle, go ahead, more power to you.
Yeah, right on. Yeah.
If the horse if you want to do any kind of CDI competition, you have to be introducing the horse to the double bridle because it's mandatory. So that's kind of an interesting thought process. And, when the horse is coming around to 3rd level, 4th level, what you want to do. And in general, most horses are totally okay with a double, and it'll be fine. And so you can put it on, you can see how it works, how the horse likes it, and all this kind of stuff. So to answer the specific question, my horses in general will go in the double all the time because they don't mind it. It's fine. You just train them. I don't see a bunch of reasons why you should be switching back to the snaffle, unless the horse is a bit nervous or a little bit uptight, or if you have a problem with a double. Saying that, have come across a few horses, and then I would switch back to the snaffle in light training days and hacking days and these kinds of situations. But if I'm training the horse to be developing him or her to the Grand Prix, then of course they have to be doing it in the double. If it's an older schoolmaster horse, then the horse is fully trained, everything's good. You've gotten to where you're going to get in your training. Then go backwards a little bit and try and do everything in the snaffle. So again, it's just unique to each horse, I think, and depending on how what you're doing, whether you're getting ready for show season, then you want to be riding in the double bridle. If you are coming off of show season, then I tend to switch back towards the snaffle, and then have a couple of months where they're just relaxing, we do a lot of hacking in the fall, that kind of thing. So I don't really think it's great to be switching back and forth kind of daily, now I want to ride the snaffle, now I'm going to ride the, and just sort of confusing the horse but the other thing is that you have to learn to ride in the double in a correct way, with supervision, and to, not be hanging on the bradoon and using that as a riding tool. I think it's just, that little bit of leverage can help in the training, but then you have to learn to ride correctly with soft hands and, all the stuff that we talk about every week. So it's just a little bit of a tool to help the training, not a crutch to be used all the time. And, so like if you're riding around in a double and you feel, oh, this horse feels great, then you can let the curb rein go, you can tie it up and just ride off the snaffle. That's why it's a double bridle. It has 2 bits to allow you to, use them independently. And so you can kind of think about it in that way, if you don't put any pressure on the curb bit, then you're not really using it. So, you're doing good and the horse is going fine. Yeah, that's kind of my thoughts. It's a good question. It really just
depends.
A lot of people ask it like, should I train a pirouette and then next day do a pirouette in the snaffle bridle just to show that I can. Well, yes,
yeah.
but yeah,
Probably not.
Yeah,
The horse probably isn't going to be able to do that, honestly. Maybe, but
yeah, I mean, good if you can. I guess.
Yes, exactly.
I really like to have a theory and a purpose behind everything that I'm doing, not just doing it to say that I can or to be switching around, and you like things to make sense, right? So that's kind of my thoughts on it.
Well, thank you guys for the tip. That was great. And thanks for Total Saddle Fit for continuing their sponsorship of it. I wanted to mention that once again this year, this is our 5th year, that the Horse Radio Network will be the official radio network of Road to the Horse, which is the world's leading colt starting competition. It's going to be happening right down the street from Maurice's house at the Kentucky Horse Park at the All-Tech Arena. And we are very excited to be doing that. Jennifer, my wife, is heading up, and her and Tara Carter, whose husband has competed in it twice, will be doing the commentary. We'll be doing 3 days of coverage over on Horses in the Morning. So you can find out all the details about that over at horsesinthemorning.com. That's coming up the 3rd weekend of March, and we're just excited to be there again. It's the 23rd, 24th, and 25th. It's their 15th annual, and it's the only event that sells out the All-Tech Arena every year, all 9,000 seats. So we're looking forward to providing that coverage to you once again, and we will be providing the only live coverage of the finals on Sunday. Also, I wanted to just because he was so influential for us, Dr. Pierce Lyons died today, who was the founder of Alltech. I don't know if you heard that, Reese, but
I did, yeah.
He was so good to all of us in the press through the WEG in 2010. He was terrific with Samantha and I, who we did the WEG show back then, and we would not have we were so new, and nobody really knew who we are, yet we had done the World Equestrian Games radio show for 2 years, and he took a liking to us for some reason. We were turned down for press passes until he made a phone call. And then we had a press pass. We had a pass that got us anywhere we wanted to go for the entire 16 days because Dr. Lyons made a phone call. So, and the 2010 WEG in Kentucky, I don't know that it would have happened without Alltech. So, he was a friend to us, and we even saw him recently. So I was very sad to hear that. I didn't know that there was an issue there, and we just want to wish his family and everybody at Alltech the best.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a bit blow for our state. He was very influential also in our state and agriculture in Kentucky. So, that I just saw that actually, and I'm very sorry for his family. So, he will be remembered well, and for sure, with all those things. So, in regards to his family,
and not
for
only
sure.
that, he'll be remembered every time you go to an amusement park and see Dippin' Dots, because Alltech was the inventor of Dippin' Dots.
I didn't know that.
Yep.
I really like the bourbon barrel ale, in which they also brew.
Yes,
there.
I knew you were going to bring that up.
Yep, that's actually my favorite beer. So yes,
Dippin' Dots and beer. There you go.
Yeah, and it seems like the company itself, his son was named the CEO and chairman. So it will stay in their family. So that's nice to hear. So tough day for sure. So. Well, as always, everyone, you can find our show notes and links to today's guest on our website, dressageradio.com. Like us on Facebook, just search Dressage Radio Show. Follow us on Twitter at Horse Radio. My website is maplecrestfarmky.com, and my email is reese@horseradionetwork.com.
The best way to find me is probably on Facebook, or my email is philip@horseradionetwork.com. I'd like to thank our sponsors this week for allowing us to put on a show. And don't forget to check out all the other shows on the Horse Radio Network at horseradionetwork.com.
Everybody, keep your heels down and your shoulders back, and we will talk to you next week.